A coach's challenge for moms, I'll tell you, from my point of view, we face these all the time. But think about it for a minute. All of us in this room, are we not living in two worlds? We're living with one foot in a world where nothing has changed. The restaurants are all open. Starbucks is still selling whatever your favorite drink is if you go there. And there are an awful lot of people, the oblivious ones, where their lives haven't changed. If they haven't lost a job, if for whatever reason their business is still secure, nothing much has changed in their world. And that's why they think you're such a nut. But we have a foot in that other world. And there we are. Most days we have to live in that first world where we have to wake up, get the kids ready for school, get to a job, we have to go grocery shopping. That world hasn't changed, but now we have this added layer. And sometimes that's what can actually drive you kind of crazy, because now you're seeing things through a different point of view. How many of you know what the logo looks like for FedEx? Very, very common. Did you know that there is an arrow hidden in the logo for FedEx? I should have brought it with me. Next time you see a FedEx logo, take a look at the word EX, and between the E and the X, you're going to see a white arrow. Now, once you see that arrow, you can never go back. It's like, I've got a glimpse of that arrow. Now I see the truth, I see this subliminal message they've been sending me. You know what? The same holds true for survival. Once you realize the downward spiral the economy is on, once you realize that there's no rewind button, I would love it if someone could just push rewind, and all of a sudden it's 2003, 2004 all over again. You know what I would do? I'd sell my house. I'd sell my house and take that big old profit and go do something smart with it. But it's not, and there is no rewind button. And so coaches and managers, the leaders of a family, this is what we face. So we've had just our emotions are involved, feelings of just being overwhelmed. A mom's natural instincts can actually work against her. So we have that natural instinct to protect, right? And yet all of a sudden we start thinking about what ifs. What if this happens to my family? How will I protect my kids from this event or that event? If I homeschool, how long will I be allowed to homeschool? Could that right be taken away from me? The other day I had a mom just almost make me cry. She was standing in my kitchen and she said, Lisa, sometimes I wonder what I'll do if they come and take my kids away. I was like, what? You just can't live in that place for very long. But our natural instinct sometimes as women, it just kind of gets the best of us because we want to protect, we want to nurture. And yet sometimes when we see and think there are scary things coming, it makes it harder. And finally, not taking care of herself. I heard something brilliant just recently on the kind of going along with taking care of yourself. And this person said, you need to think back to a time where you were in a really good place. It could be where you were physically fit. It could be a place where you were doing great financially. Maybe it was a place where you just, life was going great. And backtrack. Ask yourself, what can I do to backtrack? And so for myself, I remember when I would go to the gym every single day, I would just, drive home from work and zip, and sometimes I'd have to force myself, to make that right-hand turn, but there I was. And if you can backtrack and say, okay, what was going on then? Did I have some support I don't have now? Did I make a decision along the way that has made life more complicated? And see what you can do to kind of backtrack and get back to that happy place is what I call it. And it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to hire help if you can. It's okay to barter for help. If there is someone that can help take a load off of your shoulders. And guys, you know how important that is when the wife is overwhelmed. When mom is overwhelmed, it really just does make life very difficult for you too. Teamwork troubles. Whoops. I don't know how I go back. Arrow? There we go. Teamwork troubles. And this could be just a couple of attitude problems. Recently I heard one mom tell me they needed extra money. What time is it? 3 o'clock? Only 3 o'clock? 3 or 5, okay. Once I heard a mom tell me, Lisa, it's my husband's job to bring in the income. And they were struggling, they needed extra money. And I just looked at her and I was just appalled because her husband worked hours like from 9 a.m. to like 8 or 9. He works in the media. mainstream media. And he would come home really late, and I thought, well, when is he going to take on an extra job? And later on, he looked at me and said, Lisa, when does she expect me to do that? And it was just that attitude of should. You should be doing this. He should be doing that can create friction. And I will tell you, just from, a wife's point of view and a prepper's point of view, survival mom's point of view, this is no time to allow just those little problems to exist in your home. And if there's resentment and you're thinking, well, my husband should be doing this, decide if it really needs to be done, and if it isn't, just be at peace with it. Because I told my husband last week, we read something on Survival Blog about someone who had taken a horse trailer, maybe you read it, retrofitted it, it had electricity. I'm reading that, and I'm thinking, I wouldn't know where to start. I would not know where to start to do that. And I called him over, I said, honey, you read this is your job. So, I know what I don't know, and probably a lot of you do too. Men, you know what you don't know, and you can say, honey, this has to be your department. Okay, and vice versa. Teamwork troubles, just the other part of this would be, what if the wife's not on board? What if the husband's not on board? What if, you have a relationship with a great person, but they're not on board? Okay, let me just give you 2 or 3 tips for that. First of all, you have to make a choice, and that is, do you try to talk them into it? And the answer to that is no. Because when did you first come to realize you had to do this? Is it because someone told you had to? Or was it because you started realizing that things were going on and it was necessary? And it just has to be that dawning realization. What you can do, though, is start looking at natural disasters, things that are happening in the news, and just saying, what if that happened to us? What would our family do if we had to live without electricity? And you just kind of start at just a place where it's just very, there's the news, no one can deny it. And yeah, maybe, we may not have a tornado here, but what if something else happened? And then the biggest disaster that every family should prepare for, and that is every person in this room, the biggest disaster is a financial disaster. Sometimes we like to go off on this EMP thing, and we like to read some kind of disaster porn is what I call it, and these terrible things, and you just, you go through 1 second after, you go through Last Light, and you go through all of those books, and it's just like, you go to Amazon, what's another disastrous book I can read? And I think that, okay, I read more than my fair share also, but where was I going with that? Financial. Thank you. But you know what? A financial disaster could happen in your home this afternoon. A business could shut down. A company could decide to move elsewhere. Your job could be erased. And let's face it, we could wake up one of these mornings and your bank account has been devalued by half. Belarus, the citizens of Belarus, yes, it's a tiny country, and over near Russia, but they woke up to a devaluation of their currency just a few days ago. And that could happen. So if it does, you start thinking, well, what can I do? How could I kind of mitigate, the effects that disaster would have on my family? And I think there aren't very many people, even the most oblivious girlfriend, even the most, stubborn husband or whatever, who would say, no, we don't need to prepare for financial disaster. Because you know what? It really doesn't even matter how much money you have in your account. One of my very best friends is from a family that owns one of the largest privately owned corporations in our state. And they have had to do everything in their power to not shut down. They have laid off hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. It can happen to anyone. And in the days of Germany, during their days of hyperinflation, the group that was hit the hardest was the middle and upper middle class. The people at the far end of the scale that owned, their estates, they could afford to grow their food. They had people working for them and taking care of, life went on. At the bottom end, you had people who never did have much of anything. They were used to the hard scrabble type of life. But it was the ones in the middle, the ones that had been saving for retirement, the ones that had been doing everything right. Did you feel like that the last couple of years? We're doing everything right. We're the ones that have done everything just like we were told to do. And it was that group in the middle that was hit the hardest because they were not ready to just scrabble for the day-to-day necessities. And they were the ones that watched their savings just disappear. And so they're going back to convincing someone. If you can get your wife or a relative on board just for the financial part of it, and you start thinking, okay, what if the value of your bank account was cut in half? All of us saw, if you had any kind of retirement or investment account, what was it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, all of a sudden the value just went down. It was like all of a sudden you open an envelope and what happened? What happened to that? That could happen again. And just remind them of that and say, well, what if we took some money and we bought it in things that cannot be devalued, like freeze-dried food. But that really is, if you can get someone on board to prepare for a financial disaster, they may not realize it, but they're preparing for other things as well. And finally, just kind of how to deal with family members that are just oblivious or in denial or just angry about the situation. Get your kids and grandkids on board and put it in a way that it's fun. When you teach your son, you teach your son's son. Your team is all you've got. They need to know who does what around here. So if Dad tells me we're going to be shooting a gun, Mom, do I have to go shoot a gun? They need to know who is doing what, who's in charge, what's going on. And I think one of the most important is why. Why are we doing this all of a sudden? I love the use of children's literature. If you have kids that are aged probably 5 years old and up, Little House on the Prairie books. There's so many wonderful children's books that tell the story of self-reliant families. The Sign of the Beaver is one of my all-time favorites, about a boy who is left in the wilderness by his dad, and he becomes friends with an Indian tribe, and it's a wonderful story of self-reliance. And start getting your kids excited about the adventure. We're learning something new. This is what Grandma or great-grandma knew how to do. And they need to know how to do it. A lot of times, we just kind of assume kids just pick up things. I don't know why we think that. The other day, I stopped to get gas, and I thought, I have never once showed my son how to pump gas. And later, my husband said, well, I've done that a few times. Well, my son sure didn't act like he had. Maybe he was just being polite to me, humoring Mom. But they need to know how, just real specific directions. How do I do this? And lots of instruction. In Les Stroud's latest book called Will to Live, he tells a story of a family that is stranded out at sea in just a little tiny raft. And for whatever strange reason, the dad has it in his mind that he has to do everything. So he never teaches anyone else in that group how to clean a fish. He never teaches them how to spear a fish. He never teaches them how to steer and maneuver in the water with that particular boat. And Les Stroud points out that what a disaster that is when you don't pass on those skills to other people, because that other person is your backup. It's not so much having an extra shovel or having, an extra form of, way to purify water. It is also having a person who can then come along and you're sick. As parents, grandparents, don't we always assume we're going to be in the position of strength? I do. I can just picture myself, a pandemic, and here comes, Florence Nightingale. And I'm giving out those little sippy things of water and the rehydration. I'm mixing it all up. But you know what? I am just as likely as someone else to be there on a cot, and people have to come in, in quarantine outfits, to deal with me. So that's another reason to teach your kids and your grandkids what you know how to do.